The Galactic Council met in the Great Chamber of Nexus Prime, as they had for 10,000 years. 12 species sat at the curved table that floated above a holographic map of known space. They called themselves the Elder Races, and they believed they had earned that title through centuries of wisdom and careful governance. Today, they discussed humanity.
"Look at this growth pattern," said Councillor Vethrani of the Keth Dominion.
His scaled skin caught the chamber's blue light as he gestured toward the map. A cluster of yellow dots spread across the Orion arm like a disease. 60 years ago, they discovered fold space travel. 60 years, and now they occupy 47 worlds. The other counselors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Mallory ambassador, a delicate being with translucent wings, spoke softly.
"Rapid expansion is not itself a crime, Counselor.
The humans have violated no treaties." "Because we have no treaties with them," Vethrani replied.
"We ignored them.
We thought they would remain a minor species on the edge of civilized space."
"We were wrong." High Counselor Drethmal of the Vorn hegemony leaned forward.
His ancient eyes had seen empires rise and fall across 3 centuries.
"What do you propose, Vethrani? War with a species that has done us no harm?"
"Not war," Vethrani said carefully.
"Correction, a precise military action to limit their growth before it becomes uncontrollable.
We destroy their orbital shipyards.
We remove their unified government.
We fracture them into smaller manageable groups. In a century, they will thank us for preventing the destruction
that unchecked expansion always brings."
The chamber fell silent.
What Vethrani proposed was not unprecedented.
The Council had done this before to species that threatened galactic stability. But those had been aggressive races, conquerors and destroyers.
The humans were merely fast.
They breed quickly, observed Councillor Thenva.
They adapt quickly. They build quickly. These are not crimes. Not yet, Vethrani agreed. But we have seen this pattern before. Rapid expansion leads to resource hunger. Resource hunger leads to conflict. Better to act now, while the solution is simple, than to wait until it requires genocide. The vote was close.
7 in favor, 5 opposed.
The Mallory and then delegations walked out in protest.
But the motion carried. The Council authorized a corrective strike on Earth. John Morrison was 67 years old and he was tired of war. He knelt in his garden behind the small house in Montana, working soil between his fingers.
The mountains rose purple and gold in the morning light.
Somewhere nearby, a river whispered over stones.
This was peace.
This was what he had fought for across 4 decades in the United Earth Navy. His wife Sarah had loved this garden. She had planted the roses that now bloomed red and white along the fence. She had been gone 3 years now, taken by a cancer that all humanity's medical advances could not cure. But the roses remained. Morrison tended them carefully, as if caring for them meant caring for some part of her that still lived. His daughter Emily served aboard a colony ship near Tau Ceti, helping establish humanity's newest settlement. She called when she could. She worried about him living alone.
He told her he was fine. Most days that was even true.
Morrison had commanded fleets. He had written the tactical doctrine that the entire Earth Navy used. He had built the modern military from nothing,
transforming a collection of defense platforms
into a force capable of protecting humanity across 47 worlds. And then he had retired because he believed the fighting was done.
He was pulling weeds when the sky caught fire.
The first thing he noticed was the light. It came from the east, a flash so bright it cast sharp shadows even in full daylight. Morrison looked up, shielding his eyes, and saw trails of fire streaking across the blue sky.
Not meteors. The trails were too straight, too precise. Weapons fire. He ran inside and turned on the emergency broadcast system. Static at first, then fragments of panicked voices. Under attack, orbital platforms destroyed. Geneva is gone.
Morrison stood very still in his living room as the world he had built collapsed around him.
Through the window he could see more fire in the sky.
The orbital shipyards, he realized. They were destroying the shipyards. The attack lasted 3 hours. Morrison watched it all on every screen he could find, piecing together what was happening from scattered reports.
An alien fleet had appeared without warning.
800 warships of designs he recognized from intelligence briefings.
The Galactic Council.
The so-called elder races. They had decided that humanity needed to be corrected.
Orbital Defense Platform Armstrong. The pride of Earth's military was destroyed in the first 15 minutes. The unified government complex in Geneva was hit with precision strikes that turned 3 square kilometers into glass. 14 million people died in those 3 hours.
14 million lives ended because 12 species had decided that humans were growing too fast.
Morrison sat in darkness after the attack ended.
The power grid had failed across most of the continent. He had a generator, but he did not turn it on.
He simply sat and thought about everyone he knew who had been in Geneva.
Friends, former colleagues, people he had served with for decades. When the emergency communication system finally crackled to life, he was not surprised by what he heard.
Admiral Morrison, this is Acting Commander Chen at Cheyenne Mountain. The chain of command has been effectively destroyed.
Under the continuation protocol, you have been identified as the
senior surviving officer with strategic command authority. We are requesting your immediate presence at the backup command facility.
A shuttle will reach your location within 2 hours.
Morrison looked at the dead screen for a long moment.
Then he looked at his garden, at Sarah's roses glowing faintly in the starlight. He had wanted peace. He had earned peace, but the universe had decided otherwise. He walked outside and picked a single red rose. He tucked it into his jacket pocket close to his heart.
Then he went back inside and began to prepare.
The shuttle arrived exactly when they said it would. Morrison climbed aboard without looking back at the house. There would be time for grief later. There would be time for many things later. Right now there was only the work. The backup command facility was buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. It had been built during the early days of space colonization, when humanity feared attacks from unknown alien species. Those fears had faded over time as the galaxy proved to be mostly peaceful. The facility had become a backup for a backup. Maintained but rarely visited. Now it was the nerve center of human civilization. Morrison walked through corridors carved from living rock. Officers saluted as he passed. Their faces were tired and afraid, but they stood straight. They had not broken. That was something.
Acting Commander Chen met him at the entrance to the main operations center.
She was young, barely 40, with the hard eyes of someone who had seen too much in the past few hours.
Admiral, thank you for coming. What's the situation?
Chen led him to a holographic display that showed the soil system.
Red dots clustered around Earth, marking the enemy fleet.
They've pulled back to what they're calling a containment perimeter.
They're not attacking anymore. They seem to think the job is done.
Morrison studied the display.
Our fleet status?
The public fleet is largely destroyed or scattered. We have maybe 60 vessels still operational within the soil system. Another 200 across the colonies, but they're too far to help quickly.
And Project Prometheus?
Chen's eyes widened. Sir, that program is classified at the highest level.
I don't have access to.
I built that program, Morrison said quietly.
I know exactly what we have. Get me a secure line to Asteroid Station 7. Authorization code Morrison Omega 773.
10 minutes later, Morrison was looking at a very different display.
Hidden inside, hollowed-out asteroids throughout the outer system. 200 warships waited.
They used technology that humanity had publicly claimed they had not yet developed.
Fold space drives that could appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning.
Weapon systems a century ahead of anything the Council had seen.
They were humanity's secret insurance policy.
Built by Morrison himself during his years as fleet commander.
He had prayed they would never be needed. How long until the Prometheus fleet can be fully activated, he asked. 72 hours for full readiness, replied the station commander.
But sir, we could have 50 ships operational within 12 hours if you give the order.
Morrison shook his head. No, we wait, we prepare, and we let them think they've won.
Chen looked at him with confusion. Sir, with respect, they murdered 14 million people.
They destroyed our government. Our people are calling for immediate retaliation. And retaliation will come, Morrison said.
His voice was calm, but something cold moved behind his eyes.
But not yet. Right now the council believes they have broken us.
They expect us to fall apart, to fight among ourselves.
To become the scattered, manageable pieces they wanted. We're going to let them believe that. We're going to go silent. No communications. No movement. Let them celebrate their victory.
He turned to face the room full of officers. They were watching him with desperate hope.
They wanted to see what humanity is capable of, Morrison said. They're about to find out. But we do this my way. We do this smart. And when we respond, it will not be with blind rage. It will be with precision. It will be with purpose.
And it will be with a message that echoes across this galaxy for the next 10,000 years. He looked at the rose still tucked in his pocket.
Sarah's rose.
She had always believed that humanity's greatest strength was not its capacity for violence,
but its capacity for patient, purposeful action.
The Council had made a terrible mistake. They had attacked Earth. And John Morrison had responded.
The war had begun. 3 weeks of silence.
In the great chamber of Nexus Prime, Counselor Vetharani accepted the congratulations of his peers.
The operation had been a complete success. Earth's orbital defenses were destroyed. Their unified government had been eliminated.
And most importantly, the humans had gone quiet.
They've retreated to their worlds, Vetharani reported to the full council. Communication intercepts show confusion, infighting, and despair. Several colonies have already declared independence from Earth. The fracturing has begun, exactly as we predicted. High Counselor Drethmal nodded slowly. And the containment fleet? Holding position around the Sol system. The humans have made no attempt to break through. They seem to understand their situation.
Vetharani allowed himself a small smile.
In a generation, they will be a dozen small,
manageable states instead of one dangerous power.
We have succeeded. The Mallory ambassador was absent from the chamber.
So was the then representative. Their protest continued, but it no longer mattered.
History would remember the Council's wisdom in acting.
Before the human threat grew beyond control, trade routes were adjusted to avoid the quarantine zone. Shipping companies complained about the longer journeys, but adapted.
Life across the galaxy continued as normal.
The human problem had been solved, or so they believed. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, John Morrison had not slept in 3 days. The command center hummed with quiet activity around him.
Officers monitored communications from across human space. Technicians tracked the Council's containment fleet. Analysts studied every piece of intelligence they could gather about the enemy. Morrison stood before the main display. Coffee growing cold in his hand, watching the pieces move. Colony status report, he said. Commander Chen stepped forward. All 47 colonies have confirmed receipt of your communication, sir. They understand the plan.
The public declarations of independence were staged as you ordered.
Behind the scenes, they're unified like never before. Morrison nodded. The Council expected humanity to shatter.
Instead, they had used the appearance of shattering as a cover.
While the enemy celebrated, human colonies were working around the clock. Mining vessels were being converted into weapons platforms. Civilian transports were being equipped with military-grade sensors. Every shipyard that survived the attack was building at maximum capacity. And they were doing it all in silence. "What about the outer colonies?" Morrison asked. Tao said he reports full cooperation.
"Your daughter sends her regards, sir."
Chen hesitated.
"She also wanted me to tell you that she volunteered for combat duty.
She's training on one of the converted frigates."
Morrison closed his eyes for a moment.
Emily, his little girl, learning to fight. She was 43 years old and a skilled engineer.
But in his mind, she would always be the child who used to sit on his lap
and ask about the stars.
He had failed to build a galaxy safe enough for her to live in peace. Now she would have to help him fix that failure. "The Prometheus fleet?" he asked, pushing the thought aside.
"Fully activated and awaiting orders. 200 ships, Admiral. The most advanced weapons humanity has ever built."
"The Council has no idea they exist."
Morrison studied the holographic map. The Council's containment fleet surrounded the soil system like a net.
They thought they were trapping humanity inside. They did not understand that humanity had never been trapped at all.
"Show me the target list," he ordered. Chen brought up a new display. 12 locations across Council space glowed red. Not military installations, economic centers.
Shipping hubs, communication nodes. The infrastructure that held the Council's civilization together.
"We could destroy any of these targets," Chen said.
"The Prometheus ships have the range and the firepower. One strike would prove that the containment perimeter is meaningless."
Morrison shook his head.
"We're not going to destroy them," Chen frowned.
"Sir, destruction is easy," Morrison said. "Any fool can destroy. What we need is fear.
We need them to understand that everything they have, everything they've built exists only because we allow it to exist." He turned to the communications officer. "Prepare a broadcast, wide spectrum, every frequency.
Every language the Council uses. I want every being in this galaxy to hear what I'm about to say."
The message arrived without warning. Across Council space, billions of beings stopped what they were doing.
As a human face appeared on every screen.
He was old with gray hair and tired eyes. But his voice carried an authority that made even the Council's military commanders pause.
"My name is John Morrison. I speak for unified humanity."
In the great chamber of Nexus Prime, Vetharani watched the broadcast with growing unease.
Unified humanity? That was impossible.
Their intelligence showed fragmentation.
Collapse. What was this?
3 weeks ago, Morrison continued.
The Galactic Council authorized an unprovoked attack on Earth.
Your forces destroyed our orbital defenses. They eliminated our government. They killed 14 million civilians whose only crime was being human. The old man paused. When he spoke again, his voice was colder. You called this a corrective strike. You believed you were teaching us our place in the galaxy.
Instead, you have made a mistake that will define the next era of galactic history. You have united humanity as never before.
Every colony, every ship, every human being across 47 worlds now stands together against you.
Vetharani turned to his aides. This is a bluff.
They have no capability to threaten us.
On the screen, Morrison seemed almost to smile.
You have 96 hours to surrender the individuals responsible for the attack on Earth. And submit to war crimes tribunals.
This is your only warning.
Fail to comply and you will discover exactly how badly you have underestimated us.
The broadcast ended. The Council's response was swift and contemptuous.
The human calling himself, Morrison, is a regional warlord speaking for a broken species.
The official statement declared.
His demands are rejected.
Any further threats will be met with additional corrective action. Humanity is advised to accept our rehabilitation terms immediately. Morrison watched the response in the command center. Officers around him muttered angrily.
Some called for immediate attack. Others wanted to wait for a better opportunity.
Morrison said nothing. He simply began the countdown. 96 hours. During those hours, the Prometheus fleet moved into position.
They used fold space jumps, appearing and disappearing faster than any sensor could track.
They were ghosts moving through the galaxy, invisible and unstoppable. The Council tracked none of it.
Their technology was centuries behind what humanity had secretly developed.
They saw nothing until it was too late.
When the 96 hours ended, 12 Prometheus ships appeared simultaneously at 12 locations across Council space. The Thrall Financial Exchange, where 30% of galactic trade was processed. The Vorn Communications Hub, which routed messages across 3 sectors. The Keth Agricultural Center, which fed 100 billion beings. And 9 other targets, each vital to the Council's civilization.
The ships did not fire. They simply held position, weapons armed, sensors active.
Their presence screamed a message that words could never convey.
We are here. We could destroy everything you have built.
And you never saw us coming. For exactly 10 minutes, the Prometheus ships remained visible. Then as one, they vanished back into fold space.
Across the galaxy, panic erupted.
Vethrani stormed through the corridors of Nexus Prime. His scales flushed with rage and fear.
This was impossible. The humans had no technology capable of this. Their fastest ships took weeks to cross the distances. The Prometheus fleet had covered in seconds.
How, he demanded of his military advisors.
How did they do this?
The answers he received were not comforting.
Analysis of sensor data suggested the human ships were using a fold space technology at least a century more advanced than anything the Council possessed.
The vessels themselves were larger and more heavily armed
than initial estimates suggested.
And if the humans had 12 such ships,
they must have more, one advisor admitted reluctantly. Many more. We have no way of knowing how many.
Vethrani's scales went pale. He had convinced the Council to attack Earth
based on intelligence about human capabilities.
That intelligence had been catastrophically wrong. The humans were not a young species struggling to catch up with their elders.
They were something else entirely.
Something that had been hiding its true strength.
Increase the containment fleet, Vethrani ordered. Double it, triple it if necessary. They must not be allowed to. Counselor, an aide interrupted. Another broadcast from the human Morrison. Morrison's face appeared on the screen once more.
He looked exactly as he had before, calm and patient.
We could have destroyed those installations, Morrison said simply. We could have killed millions of your people. Just as you killed millions of ours. We chose not to. Remember that choice. You have 30 days to surrender the war criminals.
Use that time wisely.
The broadcast ended. In the silence that followed, Vethrani realized the truth. Humanity was not trapped in the Sol system with the Council fleet. The Council was trapped in the galaxy with humanity.
And they had no idea what humanity would do next. The only being who knew that was John Morrison. And he was not finished, not even close.
The first secret message arrived on the 12th day. Morrison was reviewing casualty reports when Commander Chen entered his office with an encrypted data packet.
Her face showed carefully controlled surprise. Sir, we've received a communication through non-standard channels. The source claims to be Ambassador Meloethan of the Mallory Confederation. Morrison set down his reports. The Mallory had walked out of the Council chamber when the attack was authorized. They had publicly opposed the strike on Earth.
But publicly opposing and secretly helping
were very different things.
What do they want?
To talk, Chen said, they're offering intelligence
on Council fleet movements, internal political divisions,
and the identities of the specific individuals
who planned and authorized the attack. Morrison considered this. It could be a trap. The council might be trying to feed them false information.
Led them into an ambush, but his instincts said otherwise. The Mallory had been uncomfortable with council policy for years.
They were not natural warriors.
They were scholars, artists, diplomats. The violence against Earth had genuinely disturbed them.
Arrange a secure meeting, Morrison ordered.
Not in person, virtual connection only, full encryption. 2 days later, Morrison faced Ambassador Meloethan.
Across a holographic link.
The Mallory was beautiful in the way of her species.
With wings like stained glass and eyes that held ancient wisdom.
She looked tired and sad. Admiral Morrison, she said, I must begin with an apology. My people opposed the attack, but we did not stop it. Our protests accomplished nothing. For that failure, I am deeply sorry. Morrison studied her carefully.
Apologies are easy, Ambassador. What are you offering that has actual value? Meloethan nodded as if she had expected this response. Information first. The council is fracturing. Vethrani's faction maintains control. But their grip is weakening.
Many species are frightened by your demonstration. They believed humans were a minor threat.
Now they wonder what else they were wrong about. And what do you want in return? An understanding, Meloethan said. When this conflict ends, and it will end, the galaxy will need rebuilding.
The Mallory wished to be part of that rebuilding.
Alongside humanity rather than against it.
We offer our help now as proof of our intentions.
Morrison was silent for a long moment. He had spent his career studying potential enemies.
He had rarely considered potential friends. But war created strange alliances.
And the Mallory's information could save countless human lives.
I make no promises, he said finally. Trust will need to be earned through actions, not words.
But I'm willing to listen.
Tell me about Vethrani's plans. The intelligence proved invaluable. Vethrani, increasingly desperate, was pushing for a second strike. He wanted to target the human colonies directly,
believing that destroying them would finally break human morale.
He was gathering support among the more militant council species,
promising quick victory and complete elimination of the human threat. But other species were wavering.
The then an isolationist race, who had also opposed the first attack,
were quietly pulling their ships back from the containment fleet. Several minor species were petitioning for neutrality.
The council's unity was cracking.
Morrison shared this information with his command staff during a late-night briefing.
The room buzzed with discussion.
Some officers wanted to exploit the divisions immediately. Others counseled patience.
We have 30 days before our deadline expires, Morrison reminded them. In that time, I want precision strikes against military targets only. Nothing that kills civilians. Nothing that gives the council propaganda to unite their people against us. Sir, one officer protested, they killed 14 million of our people.
Why should we show them mercy they didn't show us?
Morrison turned to face the young man. His eyes held something that made the officer step back involuntarily. Because that's not who we are, Morrison said quietly.
Because the moment we become what they fear, we lose something we can never get back. We will have justice. We will have security. But we will not become monsters to achieve it.
The room fell silent. Morrison turned back to the holographic display.
Show me the target list, he ordered. Military infrastructure only.
Shipyards that build warships, weapons depots, command and control facilities. And for each target, I want a full analysis of civilian population in the area.
If we can't hit it cleanly, we don't hit it at all. The first strike came on day 18.
The Voron hegemony operated the largest military shipyard in Council space. It orbited a gas giant in a system called Dressreach, named for the High Counselor's ancestor who had first colonized it. The shipyard produced 30 warships a year, each one capable of devastating a small planet.
3 Prometheus ships appeared without warning. Their weapons were surgical, precise, devastating.
They destroyed the shipyard's construction facilities,
its weapons storage, its military docking bays.
They left the civilian habitat modules untouched. The shipyard's workers watched in a stunned disbelief
as their workplace disintegrated around them while their homes remained safe. The attack lasted 4 minutes.
Then the Prometheus ships broadcast a message on all frequencies.
This facility was used to construct warships that participated in the attack on Earth.
The individuals responsible for that attack have not been surrendered.
This is the consequence. No civilians have been harmed. The next target will be announced in 48 hours.
Then they vanished.
Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched recordings of the attack.
They saw the precision.
They saw the restraint.
They saw the message that came with each strike.
We could kill your civilians. We choose not to.
The contrast with the Council's attack on Earth was impossible to ignore.
Morrison watched the after-action reports in his office. The strike had been perfect. No civilian casualties. Complete destruction of military capability.
Maximum psychological impact. But his hands shook slightly as he reviewed the numbers.
47 enemy combatants killed. Maintenance crews. Soldiers.
People who were simply doing their jobs when death came from nowhere.
They had families. They had hopes and dreams.
And Morrison had ended all of that with a command. He pulled Sarah's rose from his pocket. It had dried and faded over the weeks, but he kept it with him always.
A reminder of the life he had wanted.
The peace he had failed to protect.
Sarah, he whispered to the empty room. Tell me I'm doing the right thing. No answer came. There never was an answer.
He had to find his own certainty.
Commander Chen appeared in his doorway. Sir? The target package for the next strike is ready for your review.
Morrison tucked the rose away and straightened in his chair.
The Keth Weapons Depot? Yes, sir. Analysis shows minimal civilian presence. We can hit it cleanly. And Vethrani's response to our first strike? Chen's expression darkened.
He's accelerating plans for a second attack on human space.
Our intelligence suggests he's pushing for a massive strike on the outer colonies.
He believes that if he can destroy enough of our population centers,
the survivors will surrender. Morrison nodded slowly. He had expected this.
Vethrani was a gambler. When his first bet failed, his instinct was to double down rather than fold. It was predictable behavior.
And Morrison had planned for it.
Let him gather his fleet, Morrison said.
Let him think he's being clever.
When the time comes, we'll be ready. Sir, if they attack the colonies, Chen hesitated.
Your daughter is at Tau Ceti.
Morrison's face revealed nothing, but something flickered in his eyes. I know exactly where my daughter is, Commander. And I know exactly what we need to do to protect her and everyone else.
Vethrani wants to play games with human lives. He's about to discover what happens when humans play back.
He stood and walked to the main display,
looking at the galaxy spread out before him like a game board. Somewhere out there, enemy fleets were gathering. Somewhere out there, decisions were being made that would determine the fate of billions.
And here, in a bunker beneath the mountains, an old man who had wanted nothing but peace was deciding how to end a war.
Prepare the second strike, Morrison ordered. And activate contingency Omega. When Vethrani makes his move. I want the Prometheus fleet ready to make ours. Chen nodded and hurried away.
Morrison remained at the display, watching the lights that represented human colonies scattered across the stars.
14 million dead.
That was the price of his failure to predict the Council's attack.
He would not fail again.
Whatever it cost him, whatever it took from his soul, he would protect his people. Even if it meant becoming something he had never wanted to be.
Counselor Vethrani stood before the War Council. his scales dark with determination. The chamber was smaller than the main council hall, designed for military planning rather than diplomatic ceremony. Around him sat the fleet commanders of 6 species, representing the most powerful military forces still loyal to the council. They believe their precision strikes will break our will, Bethrani said, pointing to the holographic display that showed the destroyed shipyard. They believe that by sparing civilians they appear merciful. But what they actually show is weakness. They could destroy our cities, but choose not to. That is a weakness we will exploit. Fleet Commander Gretner of the Voron leaned forward. He was old, scarred from decades of military service. What do you propose, Counselor? A second strike. Larger than the first. We bypass Earth entirely and hit their colonies directly. Bethrani pulled up a new display showing human space. Their colonies are scattered, poorly defended. We target the largest population centers: Tosite, Epsilon Eridani, Proxima. We kill hundreds of millions. We show them that their restraint will not be matched. The room stirred uncomfortably. Even among those who supported action against humanity, this was extreme. That would be genocide, said Admiral Thenver, one of the few then officers who had not withdrawn from the containment fleet. The then High Command will not support such action. Then the then can stay home, Bethrani snapped. This is war. The humans understand that. Look at what they did to our shipyard. 47 of our people dead. They claim restraint, but they are killers like any other species. We must simply kill more than they do. Gretner studied the display. And their secret fleet? The one that appeared at our economic centers? Bethrani waved dismissively. A small force used for terror rather than true military action. They showed us 12 ships. Perhaps they have twice that many. But we can gather 1,200. When we arrive at their colonies with overwhelming force, their little secret fleet will be meaningless. The discussion continued for hours. Some commanders expressed doubts. Others embraced Bethrani's plan eagerly, seeing it as a chance to prove their species' dominance. In the end, the vote was 7-3 in favor of the second strike. The fleet began to assemble in secret, far from the containment perimeter around Seoul. Ships were pulled from defensive positions across council space. Supply lines were established. Target coordinates were loaded into navigation computers. Bethrani watched the fleet grow day by day, confident that he was about to correct his species' greatest mistake. He did not know that Ambassador Mullarethan was watching too, and sending every detail directly to John Morrison. In the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Morrison reviewed the intelligence with growing concern. 1,200 ships, Commander Chin reported. The largest fleet assembled since the Fourth Galactic War. They're gathering at the Dreth Nebula, using the sensor interference to hide their buildup. Morrison studied the display. Target priority? Tau City first. Largest population, most developed infrastructure. If they destroy it, they believe the other colonies will surrender. Chen paused. Sir, your daughter? I know. Morrison's voice was flat. He had known for days that Emily was at the top of Bethrani's target list. He had considered pulling her out, using his authority to transfer her to a safer location. But that would mean abandoning the millions of other humans at Tau City. And it would show weakness that the enemy would notice. Emily had chosen to serve. She had chosen to fight. He would not dishonor that choice by treating her differently than any other soldier. How long until they were ready to move? He asked. Melody Intelligence suggests 5 days. They're still loading supplies and coordinating jump calculations. 5 days. Morrison had planned for this moment since the war began. Project Prometheus was not just a secret fleet. It was a doctrine. A philosophy of warfare designed for exactly this situation. Activate all Prometheus vessels, he ordered. Full combat readiness. I want them in position around Tau City
before the Council fleet arrives. Sir, that's 200 ships against 1,200. The math doesn't favor us. Morrison allowed himself a small smile.
The Council thinks this is about numbers. It isn't. It's about technology and tactics and will. Their ships are built for intimidation. For overwhelming primitive species who can't fight back. They've never faced an enemy that can match them. They're about to learn what that feels like.
He turned to the communications officer.
Open a channel to all Prometheus commanders. Priority encryption.
The screen filled with faces.
Ship captains. Squadron leaders. The best officers humanity had ever produced.
They had trained for years for a battle that they hoped would never come.
Now it was here.
You all know the situation, Morrison began.
The enemy is coming for Tau City. 1,200 ships against our 200. By any conventional analysis, we should lose. He paused, letting the words sink in. But we're not going to fight a conventional battle.
We built the Prometheus fleet to be faster,
harder to track, and more precisely lethal than anything else in the galaxy.
The Council ships are powerful, but they're slow and predictable. They fight in formations that haven't changed in centuries.
We're going to use that against them.
He pulled up a tactical display,
showing Tau City in the surrounding space. When they arrive, they'll expect to find a colony with minimal defenses. Instead, they'll find us waiting. But we're not going to meet them in a straight fight. We're going to hit them from every angle. Disrupt their formations.
Target their command ships.
And make them doubt everything they think they know about warfare.
One of the captains spoke up.
Sir, what about their ground forces? If any ships make it through to the colony?
They won't, Morrison said firmly.
I will not allow a single enemy vessel to reach firing range of Tau City. Those are my people down there, your people. Our families and friends. And everything we're fighting to protect.
We hold the line, or we die trying.
There is no middle ground.
The faces on the screen hardened with resolve.
These were humans.
They had been underestimated by the galaxy their entire existence. They were done being underestimated. We jump in 6 hours, Morrison concluded.
Get your crews ready. And remember what we're fighting for. Not revenge, not hatred. We're fighting so that no one ever again
thinks they can attack our homes without consequence.
We're fighting to prove that humanity will never be a victim again. The channel closed. Morrison stood alone in the command center,
surrounded by the hum of computers and the quiet murmur of officers at their stations.
Sir, Chen asked, are you all right?
Morrison looked at her with eyes that had seen too much
and expected to see more. I'm about to send 200 ships
into battle against impossible odds.
Some of those people won't come back. Some of them I've known for decades. And somewhere in that colony we're going to defend. My daughter is preparing to fight for her life. He straightened his uniform. No, Commander, I'm not all right, but I'm ready. And that's what matters. The Prometheus fleet jumped to Tau Ceti in perfect formation.
They emerged from fold space on the far side of the colony's primary star,
using its radiation to mask their arrival from any enemy scouts.
Morrison transferred his command
to the fleet flagship, Prometheus I. It was a new ship, sleek and deadly, equipped with technologies that would have seemed like magic to the Council's engineers.
Weapons that could punch through shields
their enemies thought were impenetrable. Engines that could outrun anything in the galaxy.
And sensors so advanced
they could track individual life signs across an entire star system. The colony spread out below them. On the main display, 3 billion humans lived there.
On a world they had terraformed.
From barren rock in less than a generation. Cities gleamed on the dayside. Farms and forests covered continents.
That had been designed to specification.
It was humanity's greatest achievement. Built through cooperation and determination. And somewhere down there, Emily was waiting.
Morrison pushed that thought aside.
There would be time for personal concerns later. Right now there was only the mission.
All ships report ready,
the tactical officer announced. Enemy fleet arrival estimated in 18 hours. Good, Morrison said. Begin deployment pattern Alpha. I want every ship in position.
Before they see us.
And maintain complete communication. Silence until I give the order. The Prometheus fleet spread out across the Tau Ceti system like a web. Each ship positioned to maximize its field of fire,
while minimizing its exposure to enemy sensors.
They waited in the darkness.
Predators ready to spring.
18 hours. Morrison would not sleep during any of them. He could not afford to.
When Vethrani arrived with his 1,200 ships,
expecting an easy slaughter, he would find something very different waiting for him.
He would find John Morrison.
And humanity's answer to the attack on Earth.
The Council fleet emerged from full space.
Like a storm breaking over the horizon. 1,200 ships materialized in perfect formation. Around Tau Ceti's outer planets.
Battleships, cruisers, carriers filled with assault craft. The combined military might of 6 species.
Gathered to crush a single human colony.
From the bridge of his command ship,
Fleet Commander Gretner surveyed the system with satisfaction. Long-range sensors showed the colony world orbiting peacefully ahead. No defense platforms. No significant fleet presence. Just 3 billion humans waiting to learn the price of defiance. No enemy vessels detected.
His sensor officer reported.
The colony appears undefended. Counselor Vethrani stood nearby, watching the display with anticipation. As expected, their secret fleet is probably still skulking around Council space, trying to frighten us with more precision strikes. They never imagined we would bypass Earth entirely. Gretner nodded, though something nagged at the back of his mind. It seemed too easy. The humans had shown remarkable capability in their earlier attacks. Why would they leave their largest colony unprotected? Advance in standard formation, he ordered. Full sensor sweep. If anything moves, I want to know about it. The massive fleet began its journey toward the colony world.
At maximum speed, they would arrive in 6 hours. Plenty of time to savor the coming victory. They were halfway there when everything changed.
Morrison watched the enemy fleets approach from the bridge of Prometheus 1.
He had studied Council tactics for 40 years.
He knew exactly how they would move. Exactly how they would think.
And he had positioned his ships accordingly.
All vessels report ready, the tactical officer whispered. Even though the enemy could not possibly hear them.
The tension demanded quiet.
Morrison took a deep breath. This was the moment.
Everything he had built, everything he had planned,
came down to the next few hours. Begin Phase 1, he ordered. Light them up. Across the system, 50 Prometheus ships
simultaneously activated their targeting sensors.
The beams sliced through space like searchlights,
painting Council vessels with targeting data.
On the Council flagship, alarms erupted. Contact, the sensor officer shouted. Multiple contacts, 50. No, more. They're everywhere. Gretner spun to the tactical display. Red dots appeared throughout his formation, marking the positions of human ships.
They were impossibly close, practically inside his fleet. And he had detected nothing until they wanted to be seen.
How, Vethrani demanded, how did they get so close?
There was no time to answer. The first wave of attacks had begun.
The Prometheus ships did not fight like anything
the Council had ever encountered.
They appeared from fold space, fired precise volleys
at command ships and shield generators, then vanished before return fire could reach them.
They targeted weak points in the Council formation, exploiting gaps that conventional sensors could not detect.
They moved as a coordinated unit,
each ship covering the others, creating overlapping fields of fire
that turned the space around them into a killing ground. Morrison commanded from the center of the chaos, his voice calm and steady as he directed the battle.
Squadron 7, target the Vorn carrier on grid 4 to 7. Squadron 12, cover their withdrawal. All ships, watch for those Keth destroyers trying to flank us. The Council fleet outnumbered them 6-1. But numbers meant nothing when you could not hit your enemy. Prometheus ships danced through the battlefield, always moving, never presenting a stable target.
Council gunners fired at where the human ships had been,
watching helplessly as their weapons struck empty space. This is impossible, Gretner muttered, watching his carefully planned formation dissolve into chaos. No species fights like this. But humans did. 30 minutes into the battle, the Council had lost 87 ships. The Prometheus fleet had lost 3.
Morrison watched the enemy fleet begin to waver. Their formation was broken, their command structure disrupted.
Several squadrons were attempting to retreat, folding away from the battle in disorganized panic. It was time for Phase 2. He opened a broadcast channel, transmitting directly to every ship in the Council fleet.
His face appeared on 1,000 screens, calm and resolute.
This is Admiral John Morrison of the United Earth Navy.
Your leaders sent you to die for their mistake.
I am offering you a choice. In the Council flagship.
Vethrani screamed for someone to cut the transmission.
No one listened.
They were too busy watching their ships burn.
Stand down, Morrison continued, and you will be returned to your families. Continue this fight, and not one of you leaves this system.
I destroyed your fleet's combat capability in 30 minutes.
Imagine what I can do in 30 more.
He paused, letting the words sink in.
You have 5 minutes to respond. Choose wisely. The defections began almost immediately. A then cruiser broke formation and powered down its weapons.
Then another, then a dozen. The then had never wanted this fight. They had been pressured into participation
by political necessity. Now, with escape possible, they seized the opportunity. Other species followed.
Smaller races who had joined the fleet,
out of obligation rather than conviction. Ships whose crews had watched friends die in a battle they could not win.
Within an hour, 60% of the Council fleet had surrendered.
The remainder tried to fight. Vethrani rallied the most loyal commanders for a desperate final assault, hoping to break through to the colony
and accomplish something before defeat became total. They gathered 300 ships, the best of the surviving force,
and charged directly toward Tau Ceti.
Morrison met them with everything he had.
The final battle lasted 47 minutes. It was not close. The Prometheus fleet surrounded the Council remnant, cutting off escape routes and systematically destroying any ship that refused to surrender. Vethrani's flagship was disabled, its engines and weapons reduced to scrap, its crew left alive to contemplate their failure.
When it was over, 1,200 Council ships had been reduced to drifting wreckage and surrendered vessels.
The Prometheus fleet had lost 11 ships total. John Morrison had 1.
They found Counselor Vethrani in his command chamber. staring at a blank display that had once shown his fleet. He did not resist when human marines came to take him into custody. He simply looked at them with empty eyes and asked a single question. How? We had every advantage: numbers, experience, resources. How did you defeat us? The Marine sergeant, a young woman from Earth, whose family had died in the first attack, considered the question before answering. You underestimated us, she said simply. Everyone always does. Vethrani was transported to a holding facility, along with the other council leaders, who had authorized the attack on Earth. They would face a joint tribunal, judged by both human and allied alien justice. The Malorian then had volunteered to participate, eager to distance themselves from the council's actions. The war criminals would answer for what they had done. But justice, not vengeance. Morrison stood on the observation deck of Prometheus I. Watching Tau said he turned slowly below. The colony had been saved. 3 billion people would wake up tomorrow in their homes, alive because his plan had worked. The door opened behind him. He turned to find Emily standing there, still wearing the combat armor she had put on when the alert sounded. She looked tired and shaken, but she was alive. Dad, she said quietly. Morrison crossed the deck in 3 steps and pulled his daughter into his arms. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say. They were alive. They were together. That was enough. I was scared, Emily admitted finally, when we saw the size of their fleet. So was I, Morrison said. Every commander is scared. The trick is not letting it stop you. Emily pulled back and looked at her father's face. She saw the exhaustion there and something else. Something that had cost him more than she could understand. What happens now? She asked. Morrison looked out at the stars. Now we rebuild, not as conquerors. That was never what I wanted. We proved to the galaxy that humanity can be trusted. That our strength is paired with wisdom. That we choose restraint even when we have the power to destroy. He turned back to his daughter. I'm going to announce the Morrison Doctrine. Any attack on human space will be met with overwhelming response. But we will never strike first. We will never seek conquest. We protect our own and we leave the galaxy to govern itself. And you, what about you? Morrison smiled tiredly. I'm going to go home. There's a garden that needs tending. Your mother's roses have been neglected for too long. The war ended 3 weeks later. The council formally dissolved, replaced by a new galactic assembly. That included humanity as an equal member. Vethrani and 23 other officials were convicted of war crimes and sentenced to imprisonment. The Malorian then became humanity's first true allies, building the foundation for a new era of cooperation. Earth rebuilt. The orbital platforms were replaced with newer, stronger defenses. The government reformed, wiser for the tragedy that had nearly destroyed it. Memorials were built for the 14 million. Their names inscribed on walls that would stand for centuries. And John Morrison returned to Montana. He knelt in his garden on a spring morning, working soil between his fingers, just as he had on the day the sky caught fire. The roses were blooming again, red and white along the fence. Sarah's roses. Emily visited when she could, bringing stories of the colony and the new world being built among the stars. The galaxy knew Morrison's name now. They called him the architect of human victory, the man who had responded to genocide with precision and justice. Books were written about him. Songs were sung. Children learned about his deeds in schools across 47 worlds. He ignored all of it. War was finished. Peace was his purpose now. And he would tend it as carefully as he tended the garden.
nurturing it day by day, ensuring that what grew would be strong enough to last. The sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in colors of golden rose. Morrison stood slowly, feeling every one of his 67 years in his bones. But he was smiling. For the first time since the attack, he was truly at peace. They had wanted to know what humanity was capable of. Now they knew. The galaxy had witnessed human fury, human ingenuity, human determination. But more importantly, they had witnessed human restraint, human mercy, the choice to build rather than destroy. That was John Morrison's true legacy. Not the battles won, or the enemies defeated, but the proof that humanity's greatest strength was not its capacity for violence. It was its capacity for choosing something better.